Man, that felt good. Watching McDavid score that OT winner, man, it just felt like a reminder that Canadians are really good at something, the best at something. I would argue that I haven't felt this hyped for a Canadian hockey moment since 2010. I know the Olympics in Sochi were a bigger deal, but at the time we were still riding the high off of Vancouver, and the Sochi win, it just wasn't as exciting. I can tell you that Crosby scored the golden goal with an assist from Jerome McGinley 7.5 minutes into overtime at the 2010 Olympics. I think the final score against Sweden in 2014 was 3-0, but I can't even tell you who scored. And at the World Cup in 2016, all I really remember was that they beat Team Europe in the final, and Team North America, yeah, they were just really fun to watch. Fast forward a decade, and what's the saying? Absence makes the heart grow fonder, or something like that. Well, I think that's why Thursday night felt so good. It felt like to me when Crosby scored in 2010, or when Jose Bautista hit the bat flip in 2015, a Kawhi buzzer beater 2019. It felt like one of those moments that down the line, people will ask, where were you when? And you will know the answer. With that, welcome into Top Shelf, brought to you by Skyscanner. I'm Aidan Thakkar with my guys John Matisz, Levi Smith, and fellas, that was electric. Probably one of the best hockey games I've ever watched in my life. Agree?
It's amazing how the tournament, the momentum, yes, I agree. The momentum building from the first game. The first game was wild, the pace between Sweden and Canada. And then, I think every game in the tournament was strong. But obviously the two Canada-US matches were just next level and instant classics. I think that's pretty fair to say.
I would say so. It's such a good way to display the game of hockey, especially when all eyes are watching. Like, you had everybody, hockey fans are not tuned in, and in the way that they performed out there, especially the Canada-US matches, instant classics is the best way to put it. It was a where were you moment. It was just having that much attention on hockey in general is so cool to see. And as Canadians, to see Canada come out on top, obviously a little extra cherry on top.
And just like the people, just like on social media in the States that you would never think to see mentioning hockey, being like, wow, my sport, NBA, NFL, whatever it is, look at what they're doing. They're doing it right.
Yeah.
John Cooper said, we talked about this on the last show, that this is the best thing for hockey they've done in the last decade. And I would say, at least in the salary cap era, there's nothing that has topped this in terms of an NHL put on event.
I can't recall a time when the NHL was riding such a high. It's truly incredible. I think the expectations were like, okay, there's a low bar here. We haven't had an international best on best in so long that it's going to be pretty easy for this to be entertaining. But then it just blew things out of the water. I mean, if the tournament had stopped at that first Canada-US game, I think we'd all be like, that was incredible. Okay, back to the regular season. All these regular season games are going to suck. That was such an adrenaline rush. And then the tournament kept going, and it kept getting better in a lot of ways. And, I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? Because, in a way, the start of the tournament, it was off script in a sense that, okay, we didn't think there'd be three fights in 9 seconds. We didn't think this team would do that well, or that player would do that well, or not as well as we thought that he would do. But then you get to the final game, and, if you're a Canadian hockey fan, you're thinking, okay, obviously you want them to win, but, if it's in overtime, you're okay with that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, who's playing with Sidney Crosby, his hero, he scores the goal, and they have a great embrace. And it's just, it's the passing of the torch. It happened in the NHL, 5-6 years ago, of Crosby going, hey, buddy, you're the guy now. But internationally, they haven't had a chance to do that. And it's quite incredible. It's almost the perfect script for a Canadian hockey fan that at the end of the day, you've got McDavid in the slot scoring the golden goal.
You could not have written a better script for this tournament. And I even said before the tournament, the best script is that Canada and the U.S. would split the series, and Canada would win it, or the U.S. would win it. But just for the NHL, what would be the best is for them, each team to win one. But for McDavid to win it in overtime, you have the face of the league with probably more eyeballs on that game than you'll have on the Stanley Cup final this year, if we're going to be completely honest. More people watching that.
Yeah.
And you have the face of the league scoring probably the biggest goal since maybe 2010.
I think you're right.
In the sport of hockey. And I think that's awesome. The torch has definitely passed. I will say, though, I want to get into some Olympic chatter a little bit later into the show, but next year at the Olympics, if Sid's on the team and Connor's on the team, does Sid still have the C?
I don't think anyone on that team, McDavid included, would like to take it from him. I don't think anyone's out there being like, man, I deserve it. I think for the sake of kind of where Canada hockey's at, I could see McDavid having it for sure, just because he is the face of the league. He's the face of Canadian hockey right now. I think Sid's still on that team, regardless of even how good he is. I think you have to have him there for one last Olympics, and I think he still has it. I wouldn't take it from him.
No, I don't think so. I think the other players would feel weird about it. But the thing with Crosby's tournament, I found, he ends up with 5 points, tied for the team lead. He had his moments, but like he also had his rocky
turnovers.
He was pretty invisible in that final game. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come. Like he's injured, so who knows, right? He's looked really good when he's been healthy, even in his late 30s. So I'm certainly projecting him on that team next year. But like, will he be a fourth liner? Because there's so many guys leveling up, and he's sort of holding on for dear life in terms of keeping that high standard.
If it was 2 years from now, I think it might be a different story. But just a year, like you look back at the 2010 team, Sid was the face of Hockey Canada at the point, but he was not the captain. It was Niedermayer, and it was kind of just like a respect sort of thing going on there. And I think if he didn't have a good tournament, if he had maybe like a couple assists, it might be a different story. But he's getting his name chanted by the fans everywhere he goes. Nobody's chanting Connor McDavid's name yet because he plays for a Canadian team. So like Leaf fans, Calgary fans, Vancouver fans, they don't really like Connor McDavid. It was probably weird for a lot of them to be cheering for Connor McDavid. Sidney Crosby, every Canadian right now, that is a hockey hero for every Canadian.
I mean, any hockey fan really, because his image is so sparkling clean, and he's a Mount Rushmore guy, right? Like I guess you could debate, is he the fifth out of those top 5 guys? But like, he put another check on his resume, right? Like does that, and that's actually an interesting thing. Does this end up on his Hall of Fame plaque where it's like this 4 Nations one-off tournament? Yeah, it was incredible in the moment. How are we going to look back on it 10 years? Do we go, that's not that big of a deal, it's more of like a world championship level, accolade? Or are we like, hey, that's a big deal?
That was some of the best international hockey I think I've ever seen, so I think it'll be a big deal. And I will say about Crosby, producer Zach was telling me his favorite clip was Crosby sipping on some champagne in the dressing room after, saying, who would have thought Sidney Crosby?
Rarely ever see that.
When would you ever get something like that? But one guy, contentious topic, all tournament for Canada, was Jordan Binnington. And Jordan Binnington certainly had his ups and downs. He never really had a bad game, in my opinion. He didn't have a good game until the finals, where he showed up, something about playing at that TD Garden in Boston where he did it in 2019. Yeah. Man, that guy went crazy. That save off Matisz, he stole the show. And is he a penciled-in #1 goalie now for the Olympics because of that performance?
I think he has to be. Had it not been for that game, I think there would have been a lot of different directions Canada could go, even with like the 3 guys that weren't there, and Thompson, Blackwood, and Kemper. I think you have to honor that game. People said before, like, he's got a cup win in Game 7 in TD Garden. They know that he can rise to the occasion, but that was kind of his whole kind of moving point entering this. It's like he's not great, but he can rise to the occasion, and we just had to wait and see it, and he certainly did. So I would stick with him between the pipes. I think what else could he really do?
I think penciling in is the right way to put it, where it's like, goaltending is so volatile. Like, even the Americans, I mean, is Hellebuck going to be their starter next year? Maybe not. Maybe Ottinger goes off. Swayman, maybe Demko really.
Wolf.
Yeah, maybe Wolf.
No, I
such
honestly,
a Flames homer.
Yeah.
But so we'll see. But like, John Cooper's the coach of that Olympic team, and I'm pretty sure they have roughly the same management group. So they trust this guy, and Cooper didn't even take him out of the net for the whole tournament. So he certainly is in that pole position, and as long as he doesn't tank his season next year, then I think he'll at the very least be on the team, and then I guess we'll see who's the starter.
Yeah, I think he's definitely penciled in, maybe not penned in in
not
like non-replaceable ink. You know what I mean? Like he's got that spot, but I think it'll be a fluid situation, like it would have been this tournament if, say, they'd lost that first game against Sweden. They'd have gone to someone else. But in a short tournament like that, I get why they stuck with Binnington throughout, and he rewarded them. He showed back to that. I do want to keep talking about this Olympic team because it's going to be really, really interesting to see the roster turnover, because obviously you win a tournament, so in theory, why would you change anything? But the international game is different. Bigger ice, different rules, probably a lot more penalties. You whack someone with your stick, that's a penalty in international. It wasn't in this tournament at all. So I put a couple guys here on the bubble, and let's talk about them. I have Brad Marchand on the bubble. Other forwards, Anthony Cirelli, Travis Konechny, and then 2 defensemen, in Colton Parayko and Travis Sanheim. These are the guys that I think could totally be on the team still next year, but like I wouldn't just guarantee their spots. I wouldn't say they're locks. Any of these guys jump off the page to you, maybe as somebody that might not be on the team next year?
I would start with the one guy I kind of had. He was fine, but I had a bit of a gripe with him with just Anthony Cirelli, considering who else could have been there for him. I think, despite obviously they won, but they were missing some offensive firepower a few times, and he was kind of brought there to do the opposite. And I think McDavid, McKinnon, the rest of these high-end forwards kind of proved they can shut it down defensively. So you don't need a guy like that out there. So to see, like, I don't know if Tavares was there, Scheifele, just some of these guys that have a bit more offensive upside, I would have appreciated more. And I think looking forward, that might be something they lean on more. I mean, the guy, he was like -3, didn't have any points, wasn't really shooting the puck. So that's the first guy I would go to. I will say, I think Travis Sanheim, I wasn't expecting him to be that solid. I think he fit in just perfectly out there. I would definitely, moving forward to next year, I would keep him on the team, I think. But
On your Cirelli point, like I think your point's well made, but I also disagree where I think Cirelli's, I don't know if I'd call him a lock for next year, but I think he's in really good shape, and he's kind of
when you got John Cooper.
Well,
too.
yeah,
and
I was going to say that too.
I just think, for your 4C spot, like he's so reliable, and I actually thought this went through my mind when he was getting his medal. I'm like, that guy's a winner. That guy's, a gamer. Like I can just understand why Cooper defaults to him. And I just feel like, he's young enough that he's, either going to level up next year or keep the same sort of level of play. So out of those 5 guys, that's actually the one guy that I would keep around for sure, or at least, at the very least, strongly consider him. In terms of off the team, I think Parayko, and this is less about like his overall body of work at the tournament, because I think he was fine, and this will also depend on what the play is like at the Olympics, if it's any different than Four Nations, because Four Nations was fast. Four Nations was intense. There was a lot of puck pressure, and I think it got to Parayko in terms of how he's able to handle the puck. He was good with the physicality and all that, but I feel like they were missing a Montour or a Uyghur, someone who has an edge to him, but can move the puck better, can skate a little bit better. Parayko's good when he gets going, but it's like those first couple of steps, and I feel like, opponents caught him a lot. So again, like I'm not saying like Parayko, he shouldn't have been on the team in general. It's just more like the depth of defense in Canada opens the door for someone else to be on the team.
Yeah, my note on Parayko is I actually think he was probably one of the most noticeable Canadian defensemen all tournament, because whenever he got the puck, it felt like other teams decided, we'll let him carry the puck because we can just focus on everyone else, and he's not going to hurt us here.
Yes.
And that's why it's like, Parayko's all over it. It's like, but nothing's coming from it because he's not a creator. He's fine as a 6th or 7th defenseman on a team like this, but I think what he saw when Thomas Harley joined the team, he was instantly like creating. He was skating with the puck. He was moving it. He looked fantastic, and I can't imagine him not being on the team.
He
next
was
year.
so good in the final too.
I can't
in both the
imagine-
games that he was played in. Like, I'm sure the coaching staff is like, why didn't we have him from day one?
100%, and I think he might be a lock next year. And then I think so if that means one of Sanheim or Parayko are probably gone, because I think the other guys are probably penciled in. I think Doughty's on the team. And I think an Evan Bouchard, and I got a couple other names here of guys that I think might have a shot next year. And I had Bouchard, Harley, Celebrini, Bedard, and Wilson. I'll start with the defensemen. I think when Cale Makar went out, they sorely missed having a guy who was just excellent with the outlet pass and an excellent person to put on the power play. Morrissey's obviously good, but I think you'd love a Bouchard there, the right-handed shot to just smoke one from the point, because they don't have a trigger man on that power play, really. So Bouchard, I think, has a real shot at the team next year. But then the forwards. I want to talk about Bedard and Celebrini in particular, because they're the 2 hot names right now in Canadian hockey. They're really young. They'll still be really young next year. They would be by and far the youngest players on Team Canada if they made it. But they also are probably the future of Team Canada. So what do you think? You give these guys a shot?
I think both of them have a shot. I lean towards Celebrini probably having a better shot at this point, just because his game is more well-rounded. And we saw in this tournament that, and again, like, who knows if it'll transfer to the Olympics, but let's just assume it does because it's best on best. It's amazing how entertaining this was, because it was a very defensive tournament. Like, there was a high pace, but there was also like sticks everywhere, bodies everywhere. No one was cheating for offense. There were really good defenders. Like, it was something else. So, like, I think Celebrini can keep up with that, whereas Bedard would get kind of lost. Like say like a Kyle Connor in this tournament.
Yeah,
he
Kyle Connor.
He couldn't contribute because all he does is score goals, which is great. but when he runs out of space along the wall, he's invisible. Seth Jarvis, was a little bit better, but he was sort of in the same area of like he looks so much better in the NHL because he's able to sort of spread his wings and get out into space, whereas there was no space here.
Yeah, I was thinking with there's kind of this like core bottom 6 guys of like Hagel, Jarvis, Bennett, Konechny, Cirelli. Like those kind of 5. And my thoughts on those 5 were that Bennett locked himself onto that team.
For sure.
He obviously scores the massive goal, and he was just a force for that team by and far, just like a huge difference maker, I thought, when he was on the ice. And then Hagel, same idea, super good. Jarvis, I just think, is young, so I think he's going to continue to grow. Where with Cirelli, you had some points about him, and then I just think, could we see them want to give maybe a younger guy that shot, get a little bit extra step, because obviously the speed of Celebrini and Bedard could be great, especially with that extra ice.
Yeah, and the one guy we haven't talked about that you also had on there was Brad Marchand.
Yes.
What do we think of him? Because he's a great guy to have out there. You need a scrappier guy. I definitely don't disagree with that. And honestly, like Sam Bennett kind of was him on steroids, if you so to speak.
Yeah, with better wheels, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And I definitely, it was kind of hard to see because I've been a Marchand guy through and through, and you could tell he lost a step being out there with the best of the best. And I think he seems like the guy here. He'd be the first to tell you that too. Like it was hard to keep up with, but. He's another guy almost kind of in the Crosby boat where it's like this guy's been around now for a while. He's done a good job representing the nation. Is he there next year?
Yeah, well, that was my thing. He's just getting up there, but I think I put him on the bubble because he didn't have an amazing tournament. I thought he was good, but he's obviously like lost a little bit of a step.
Yeah.
My thing is like you just want to give this guy. He's been such a gamer for so long. You want to give him a taste of Olympic action at some point, right?
Well, and I do wonder about the like leadership group, right? You've got Crosby, Doughty. There's no guarantee Doughty will be there, but he'll probably be there, right? And then Marchand. Like, those are kind of the 3 adults in the room, so to speak. And Marchand's really good with the media in terms of, I don't know if you guys caught it, but he was really pumping the tires of Team USA. And it's out of his usual playbook. He does this with the Leafs literally every year, where he goes, this team's incredible. Mitch Marner's my favorite player. And, like, says it with a straight face where you're like, he creates headlines. And so he wasn't playing ball with the Tkachuks while the Tkachuks tried to have a war of words. And then, of course, after the fact, he kind of has a little jab there. I don't know if you guys saw, but he basically said the whole group chat thing, like, that ended up biting you in
you
the
see
butt.
Brandon Hagel then post a screenshot of the Canadian guys
that was
chat.
incredible.
I thought that was some good gamesmanship there. I thought the U.S. team in general, they were missing a little bit of that. They were missing some older guys. They had no returnees from the 2016 team. I don't even know who their oldest player was.
I think Kreider, and he was a non-factor.
Yeah,
right?
and so the American team was missing that. They're not going to all of a sudden Patrick Kane's not going to be on the team next year. So maybe it is just a growth by experience kind of thing for that roster. Well, we are just a year away from running this back on the biggest stage. Tickets will surely be hard to come by, but if you want to get to Milan for the Olympics next year, Skyscanner can help make your travel easier and cheaper. Just hit the link in our bio or description. But I do want to talk about the other teams too at this tournament, because I think for every other team at this tournament, they got something positive out of it. Finland beats their biggest rivals. Sweden's 2 OT goals away from being in the final, and obviously the U.S. were as close as they've been. Probably, and as good of a roster as they've had since, I don't know, maybe ever.
Yeah,
ever.
Seriously.
There are also other countries involved outside these 4 nations. And so, Levi, I was wondering if you would go and rank these for me, your top 5 countries outside of Canada.
Yeah.
Or including Canada, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I'll probably include Canada here, just considering we're talking hockey countries. But, no, I think there's a reason that these were the 4 here. These are the 4 that can actually field full teams of NHL players. So they're all on this list with one extra team, and I'm sure anyone who knows hockey can guess that. But starting at the bottom, I actually have to start with Sweden. I do think, like you said, they were 2 OT goals away. I do think they probably have the better like hockey country in terms of just production and stuff. They've got more players than the Finns. But they lost, and I can't put them ahead of Finland as of right now because they lost that crucial matchup. So I've got Sweden in the 5th spot. On to 4, I have Finland. So again, two of the 4 teams that we just saw play, I don't even have them in the top 3. But I got to give Finland the nod, considering the hand they were dealt with their absolutely just their D-corps falling apart with no-name guys basically out there. They held their own, at least in that game against Sweden, and they had a fight in the game against Canada, so I've got to honor that. I've got them at 4. At number 3, this is where I have Russia. Obviously, we didn't get to see them here. We haven't gotten to see them in a little bit, but if this team, especially if they're able to play in the Olympics and produce a roster, I mean, some of the names on this team, it's very top heavy, but I think that's enough to give them this 3 spot. Also important to note, something I found interesting, of any country right now that has 10 active NHL players, Russia is first in points per player. Which is very interesting to note. I thought that was cool to see.
Just don't look at their blue line.
Yes, we don't need to pay attention to their blue line, but I mean, you got Kaprizov, Ovechkin, Kucherov, the goaltending too.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the best goaltending out of any country, right? I think that's fair to say. With
right there with the States, yeah,
absolutely. 1 and 2. I'm sure you can guess where I'm going with this. I can't hate to do it, USA. Not actually, but they're still at 2. This was going to be a big kind of their moment to overthrow Canada and be the #1 hockey country. And I guess the lights were just too bright. They had the home ice and everything, but we still can't do it. And we're going to have to wait at least until next year. And depending on how that goes, I don't know if this is like their kind of peak or we'll see. #1 Canada. It's been like this forever.
Play that Nickelback, man.
Play that Nickelback. Turn that Freebird off. Yeah, we got Canada at 1. I mean, I don't. To me, this feels like the best way that you can rank the top 5. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would switch Finland and Sweden. Like I know you're basing it on the tournament and everything and the head-to-head, but
yeah,
since Russia wasn't in the tournament, I guess we can think more generally. And I would put Sweden ahead of Finland.
Yeah,
a lot of their players are having poor years, so it's sort of like bringing down the hype on them. But with that blue line, when their goalies are healthy, when their forwards are producing, like they've got a lot of talent. And like it's no disrespect to Finland because it's a nation of 5 million people.
Yeah,
they produce a crazy amount of NHLers. But that's the switch I would make, and I like the shout of Russia at 3.
Finns just got to start pumping out some D-men, and then they could really climb because I think their forward group showed that they could keep up with every other team. They were scoring goals like as best bet. But our next batch of international hockey will include every top-flight country minus Russia at the World Championships this spring taking place in Sweden. And hey, if you want to build that into your holiday, Skyscanner's got deals aplenty to Stockholm. So just hit the link in our bio or description to score those top shelf deals. So John, before we move on into some of your notes still coming out of this tournament, I want to just talk a little bit more about that Olympic chatter of other teams, because we mentioned his name earlier, but I think one guy who disappointed more than anyone at this entire tournament, at least for me, was Kyle Connor with the United States. Obviously scratched. He's one of the goal-scoring leaders in the entire NHL last year. Do you think he lost his spot on the American team?
It feels like it's in jeopardy. I mean, it's kind of tricky, right? Because you look at that final game. They could have used some goal scoring. Brock Nelson didn't look good. Chris Kreider didn't look good. Vincent Trocheck didn't look good. I feel like Bill Guerin kind of dropped the ball on the depth forwards here. But that also includes Connor. Like, he didn't have a good tournament, right? So I feel like, he didn't do himself any favors, but it's not something you can't fix. And I wonder, say, if the Jets go out early in the playoffs, if he hops on a plane right to the World Championships to really improve his stock again.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think we talked about how many Canadian players are just on the outside looking in, but there are some unbelievable Americans who are left off those rosters. You got Tage Thompson, Cole Caulfield, Clayton Keller. All of these guys are just unbelievable scorers and point getters. It's do you want those guys on your fourth line and third line will be what the Americans have to decide, because their top 6 looked fantastic. The Tkachuk brothers were great. Eichel was great. Matthews was fantastic in that finals, at least passing the puck, maybe not shooting it. And then, of course, Jake Gensel was great too. But what do you think? Do you think Caulfield, Tage Thompson, Clayton Keller, any of those guys get a look next year?
I think they all have to. Yeah, I think the way that this team was structured with these depth forwards who somehow all play for the Rangers too. It's especially Olympic ice, maybe a little bit different, but with a smaller NHL ice that they were playing on and how fast it was, those guys just can't keep up. And a Vincent Trocheck or a Chris Kreider doesn't really move the needle versus a guy like a Cole Caulfield who is just a ball of energy and can score at any given moment. That's I think the direction I would go. We were talking about pre-show too, and I don't think they'd leave him off, or at least you didn't think so, Aidan, but I mean, Adam Fox did not look good in this tournament either. He just looked slow. I know he's kind of touted for his offensive abilities at times, but he didn't have that, and then his defense was also very, very poor. And I know I'm not the only one that thought that. I saw it all over my Twitter timeline. So is that a guy that you think, because I don't know exactly where they go from defensemen. I think the biggest snub people were saying was John Carlson, but he's going to be old, and I don't think he's much quicker than Fox. But that's one guy where I just watched him and I was like, man, how is he even out here?
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you've got Jake Sanderson, right? This young player who gets into the lineup because of injuries, and he looked pretty good. And him and Slavin, I mean, if you put them on two different pairs, you've got basically two shutdown pairs just by default. Like, all of us here knew about Jacob Slavin, but like,
oh my gosh, he is
so good.
He
killed so many plays in that
I saw a post
final.
that was saying that like he is the reason why the NHL needs a Defensive Defenseman of the Year award.
Yes,
because he honestly, I was watching. Is like he could win a Norris Trophy just because of this 4-game non-NHL tournament. Because everyone's just realizing that he might just be the best defenseman in the NHL in terms of being a defenseman. He is right there. He is fantastic.
It's crazy how good his skating is, because I don't know, when I watch him, like, I don't see a fluid skater, but then you look at like the NHL Edge numbers and you see how he keeps up with McDavid, and it's like, okay, this guy can really skate, and he's got a long stick and just so smart defensively. Even like make a block shot on Seth Jarvis, kind of out-dueling his teammate there. He was phenomenal.
The one other guy I thought had a great tournament and really upped his stock, potentially in the trade market, and I can't wait to get back into talking trade market, was Erik Karlsson with Sweden. I thought he looked a lot better than people were giving credit. I thought this might be kind of a going-away party for Erik Karlsson this tournament, but I think he might be on that Team Sweden next year over a Rasmus Andersson, who only got 13 minutes in that final game or whatever it was. I thought he had a good tournament. I thought he might not have been the best defenseman at the whole thing, but I thought he was solid.
Yeah, it's going to sound dumb, but Karlsson looked good playing with good players. Like, when he's in Pittsburgh, I feel like who he's on the ice with sometimes is a little underwhelming. Put him on Sweden when their back end is tremendous, got enough forwards to play with, and I feel like he kind of got on his horse and was like a vintage Karlsson at certain moments.
Yeah, that's the kind of guy that you need out there. You don't need an Adam Fox who's not doing much on offense. Sorry to rag on him, but a guy who can just provide that offensive upside, especially, like, honestly, Karlsson could have played zero defense this whole tournament, and I still would have been like, that's a guy that you need to have out there, especially moving forward. Just a facilitator.
Well, and so much of defense is effort, right? Like, if we're being honest, and so it's in Karlsson. We see it when he plays internationally. So you kind of get blinded by what he does in the NHL sometimes. But also, did you guys see the quote after they lost to Canada? He called it a nut kicker. I thought that was just
quality
chef's
stuff.
Kiss in terms of, like, you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Speaking of quotes, John, I think it's time we get into your notebook. And you were in Montreal for the first leg of this tournament. I think it's too bad you weren't in Boston. That's a tough miss, eh?
I agree.
But what do you got from that still? What are your thoughts? Empty the notebook one final time about the Four Nations.
Yeah, let's talk about the legacy of this tournament. So an international path has been paved here, guys, and we kind of knew it coming in. There were rumblings and everything, but it was officially announced that there's going to be a World Cup after the Olympics, so in 2028. And then it's just going to continue. Every 2 years, Olympics and World Cup. It was great to get that confirmation. And also, Four Nations exceeded expectations to such an extreme degree that they're clearly going to get their act together for that World Cup and, have some sort of qualifying and have 8 teams. And it's going to be really well run. Like, I feel like one of the criticisms of this tournament was all these fluid rules around injury replacements. It was very, on the seat of their pants. So I think they'll figure that out, and that'll make things a little smoother, a little more professional. But I don't know if you guys saw the press conference that the league and the PA had where Ron Hainsey was there, and he was going on about how he thinks that hockey has an opportunity here to really dig into the international side of the game and be not quite soccer, that it really owns that, that style of competition, but like a step below. And I mean, it's great to hear that as a fan, as a media member, because we had such a long, drawn-out stretch there of no best on best. And I think I see the vision. Like, if you look at other sports, it's not quite the same as hockey and soccer in terms of all these players from different places and the rivalries and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that really jumped out at me when I was in Montreal was that mention of, okay, let's be kind of like a mini soccer as far as international play. Mm-hmm. The second part, so USA, Trump, and Johnny. So Johnny there is obviously Johnny Gaudreau. He was supposed to be the rallying point for this team, and they put his jersey up in the stall, really nice to see, and, there were Johnny chants in Boston, and clearly, like, he was on their mind, but it turned into this whole political thing where, Donald Trump is on the phone with them the morning of the final, and Bill Guerin's on Fox News talking about how he would love to see Trump come to the final. And, Guerin says, oh, this isn't a political thing. It's like, well, if you're involving the president and he's talking about making Canada the 51st state on the call with the team, how is that not political? So, this is no, like, sort of judgment on all that necessarily. It's just pointing out that I think that we're going to look back on this Four Nations and it'll kind of remind us of this moment in time generally in society in North America where there's this political tension and it's like, oh yeah, there was that hockey tournament going on. Do you remember when Trump, was suddenly in the middle of things?
Well, I remember my dad always telling me about the Summit Series, and it's not the Cold War. Let's be completely straight. I'm not saying that. That is not my point. But it's just, it adds to the kind of intensity of the game when you got these two countries making jokes at each other and poking fun at each other.
Well, and even just something as take Trump out of it, something as simple. Well, I guess this isn't taking him out of it because he's part of it. But the booing of the anthem, like, that got the Americans fired up because their rationale is just don't boo our anthem. It doesn't matter what's going on. Please don't do that. It's sacred. And like I have time for that. But at the same time, I have time for the people that are booing it because that's their way of expressing their displeasure. So that's something that I think is part of the legacy of this event, as weird as that sounds. But I think we're going to look back and always think about the USA and how things went with them. Let's talk about Brad Marchand. So he had a really interesting comment to reporters a few days ago where he was talking about the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, where he sort of broke out and became a star. He ended up being the golden goal guy for Canada at that tournament. And he was talking about how the mind is a powerful thing in a sense that his mindset really changed after that tournament. Going into it, he was like, oh, it's nice to be on this team. I'll get to be around, Crosby in an international setting, etc. But he left it going, like, I can hang with these guys. Like, he thought of himself as like a second tier, third tier guy. And he looked at the Crosbys and the McDavids as untouchables. But he left the tournament with so much confidence, and he was just making the point, and I think it's relatable to anyone, right? Where, perspective's important, optimism is important, and he turned that into, that season after the 2016 World Cup. He had 85 points, career high. Next year did 85 again, and then hit 100 points. Like, he literally had his three best seasons later in his career than most after that World Cup. So I think it kind of adds up. And I'm just wondering who's that guy in this tournament who's like maybe a little bit older, who looks around and goes, I can hang. It might be Hagel. I know he's not like 35, but he's in his late 20s, and this is a huge coming out party for him. So I wonder if he starts, walking around with a little more swagger. The last thing, labor peace coming. I mean, CBA talks haven't started, but they're about to start. And at that press conference that I referenced before, you had Gary Bettman and Marty Walsh, the guy running the PA, the executive director, literally like flirting with each other openly. It was like a date that was captured on camera. Like, Gary's putting his arm around him and they're sort of joking and they're finishing each other's sentences. And it's just bizarre to see considering the history of the league and the PA and the lockouts and whatnot. And I mean, that's tremendous news for hockey fans. And I also thought it was notable that you had the PA and the NHL executives handing out the medals and the trophy. It wasn't just, hey, here's Bettman, here's Daly. You saw Marty Walsh there. You saw Ron Hainsey. Like, it was a real combined effort for this tournament. And for that to lead right into CBA talks is very promising for having that going smoothly. And I'm sure there'll be issues. I'm sure there'll be some drama. But I think things are going to get tied up pretty quickly here.
I'm just going to go from that and just ask you, because you've been watching the NHL just a few years more than I have. And
yeah, I started in the 60s, right?
Yeah. Couple, yeah. But has there been a point in time where you've been following this league, writing about this league, really analyzing, where you think it's been in a better place than it is today?
No. And it's funny, right? Because anytime Gary Bettman talks, he goes on about, oh, the league's never been better. But I think you could actually say with a straight face now where, coming off this tremendous event, like literally no notes beyond that whole fluid rules thing, which was, they just got to figure that out. It wasn't that big of a deal. And it honestly created more storylines. So, hey, whatever. Aside from that, this event was seamless. And, the players were so invested. Like, we got to give, I mentioned this on last show, but like, we got to give the players credit for this, because if they show up and don't care, it's the 2016 World Cup all over again, right? So, but to answer your question, I think we're in golden era is like a little dramatic because, it's hard to compare all the different eras, but the amount of skill in the league, the way it's officiated, and it's very like offense focused, the way the rule book is set up, the personalities in the league. I mean, the Kachuk brothers, they broke through to like the American mainstream, and they didn't win, but like they were the talk of the tournament.
They got
in a lot
dang
of
close,
ways.
man.
Mm-hmm. And like, it's great to have those personalities in this sport. And for a long time, it's been like, do these guys have anything in there? Is there any personality? And even in this tournament, and based on like media availabilities, there were some guys that were just speaking openly, which normally they're very withdrawn and cliche driven. So I think the league's in a really good spot.
I just want to add to that too, because you were talking about the importance of them kind of ramping up the international aspect of things too, and I think the NHL's always had a tough kind of deal with being compared to the other sports, obviously, especially with how U.S. prevalent baseball, hockey, or basketball and football are. Everyone always leads into that, and they've kind of followed the bottom of that totem pole. But to see NFL players like J.J. Watt, to see NBA players, and guys from all these other sports not only praising hockey, but saying how much better it is than these other sports, the entirety of the tournament, I think, was incredible to see, and just massive in the grand scheme of things of converting people into being hockey fans. But to talk about the international aspect too, those three sports, like baseball, I'll give them credit. They've got a decent kind of mix of different countries where their players come from. Basketball, we've seen the Olympics. It's USA by a million every single time. Football, it's not even a conversation. It's all American. So for Canada, or not for Canada, for hockey to be able to pull from all these different countries, they do have the most parity when it comes to that stage out of those four sports. And I think that's for sure something you lean into more and something you kind of embrace and say, this is more than just the NHL and the teams in Canada and the States. We have the best competition worldwide out of all of these sports. So why not embrace that a lot more?
I was going to say since 2004 we call it the post salary cap era, right? And COVID hit, and then we haven't seen the salary cap move, and it feels like everything's trending right now. International's trending right. The salary cap's about to get some huge jumps. It's like, are we about to enter the post Four Nations era? Like it is. I don't know if that's the turning point to define it. Maybe we end up calling it something differently, but like, it feels like everything is trending right for hockey, and I think that's awesome because it's an amazing sport. We love to do it. It's our jobs to talk about it and stuff, and if it's trending the right way, I'm happy. I don't know about you guys, so.
It's not bad for us, I'll say that much.
Speaking of being happy, it's time to get to one of the most fun parts of the show. Probably our last international themed, I'd assume.
Yeah.
Top shelf trivia. Levi, take us away, man.
Let's go.
Yeah,
and give me my chain because I'm going for the 3-peat today.
I'll have John hand it to you. You are the guy that took him down last time. But no, it's been fun doing the international stuff. We don't get to do it too often. So and like I'm saying, that hockey's great for the international purposes. So the fact that we've been able to dip into that with the trivia has been fun. I'll just give you this too now while you gloat and
Doesn't
celebrate.
look great, but get another check next to my name.
2 checks, I will say.
You're catching up.
Both in 1v1s. So we'll see if you can do that in a 3-man.
He's trying to take you down.
Competition, but no. So I'm gonna end this international trivia section off with a tournament recap, so to speak. I went through last night, combed through all of the points scorers in this tournament. So very simple for you guys. You're going to go back and forth. So which NHL team's players produced the most points in the Four Nations tournament? Aidan, I'll let you start. I'll honor your win last time. Where do you go here first?
Well, I'll go with the Tampa Boys.
Tampa Boys is correct. They had 8. They are tied for second on this list. Good showing from them.
I feel like Colorado's got to be on here.
You'd be correct. Okay. Colorado's on here. Nate McKinnon did a lot of the heavy lifting there, but Cale Makar, Lehkonen.
Yeah, Makar didn't do all that too much in the points department. He was good, though. Florida's probably number 1, I'd assume.
Florida is number 1. 13 points, 5 more than anyone else. I mean,
20 players in the team.
Yeah, they sent way more than anyone else, but a good showing from everyone from Florida.
Here's a 1-player team for you. Columbus Blue Jackets.
Columbus Blue Jackets.
You have 6 points?
Yeah, he led the tournament.
Very good.
Come on.
6 assists, unbelievable showing from Werenski. We should have given him his flowers a little bit more, but yeah, he was unreal.
Hey, if Quinn Hughes misses some more time, Werenski could have a real shot at this Norris.
Yeah.
Next up on this one, another guy who kind of led the charge for his team, but we talked about his teammate who also had a good tournament, Pittsburgh, with Crosby and Carlson.
Pittsburgh is on the list. Crosby and Carlson. They had 8 combined points here. Nicely done. 3-2 Aidan. Now it gets dicey.
Let's see. What do we got here? I'm going to go with the Ottawa Senators.
Ottawa Senators, John, not on the list.
I was
not
taking on Brady and I don't know who else.
Sanderson. I honestly, because they both scored in that last game.
Yeah,
I thought
recency bias. I was like,
I thought they would be on there.
Well,
no
a couple
sense.
guys who combined for 4 points in the last game. A couple American boys. Well, one American boy, one Canadian boy.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
The Toronto Maple Leafs, Mitch and Austin.
Toronto
They got
Maple
to be
Leafs.
right up there.
Toronto Maple Leafs are certainly up there. Got saved by that last game because they each had 1 headed into the finals, which was crazy. But yeah, they are here with where are they? 8. Those 2 guys, 4 each. So that's 4-2 Aidan. So you need to go on a run, and he needs to go on a drought real quick.
I'm just going on strong NHL teams that I know of at least one guy here. Vegas?
Vegas Golden Knights slipped in there. That's why we have 2 teams down there, 10 and 11.
goal came through.
They are one of the teams. Yeah, they were. I think Stone had like 1 point.
Yeah,
maybe.
that makes sense.
The Rangers had so many guys there, but they were so bad. It can't be them. So I'm not gonna put them up there. I'm trying to think of like, pardon me, where did Granlund get traded to again? Sorry, like a week ago.
Not gonna say.
I was gonna say,
giving
don't-
away a
don't
good
help
guess
him
there. Dang, just got traded, and I'm just thinking like that might just be it. You know, he got traded to Dallas. So Dallas.
Dallas Stars is here. Nicely
Yeah.
done, Aidan. It's 5 for you. Yes, he did some heavy lifting for sure. What did he have? Four points, I think, and
bunch
then
of goals,
Harley chipped in with one, and I think it was Asa Lindell had 1 point. So they're here with 6.
Rube Hands might have done something too.
Yeah.
But no Jason Robertson at the tournament.
No Robo, no. So that's 5 for Aidan. There's 11 here, so it makes sense to go to 6 actually. Now that I think about it, so you still have 1 more to get. But what is it? 5-3 now for Aidan.
Yeah.
I was thinking Winnipeg with it. I'm like, all their players, like obviously Hellebuck played well, but
Morrissey and Connor did not
at the
do
end
great.
of the day got sick. I don't think he put up any points, maybe 1. So where do I go now? Let's see. East Coast, anyone over there? I'm gonna say Boston. I don't feel great about it.
You're right in not feeling great about it. Boston Bruins are not here.
2 strikes.
Not right. Anything left for
So
you?
I'm
Aidan?
looking for the win.
You get one, yeah. You get one here, you win.
McDavid pull the Oilers by himself onto there.
How do I not pick
Connor
Oilers?
McDavid pulled the Oilers. I think McDavid, Ekholm might have slipped an assist
Sure.
in, but 7 points for the Edmonton boys. That's a win for Aidan.
This
I'll let
guy's
you
on a
guys.
roll.
We're
Yeah,
hot.
do you
We're
guys
hot right now?
take one last guess at these last 2? One of them I'm surprised nobody's guessed because they
Can
had
you give us a hint?
they had 2 guys on the same team. Both had really good tournaments
Ooh.
on the same team in the finals.
On the same team in the finals.
Same AHL team, same country. Both had good tournaments.
Wow. Interesting.
Oh no, we already said Tampa Bay.
I don't know. Are we tripping right now? It's not Vancouver. Oh, there you go.
Not Vancouver.
Or didn't show
We already
up.
did Edmonton.
I don't know.
I'm trying to think of
Give it
another
to
hint.
us.
I can't. Yeah,
Yeah, it's fine.
the Wild.
Oh, I did think about the Wild. So what?
Matt
Faber?
Faber, Boldy, and Eriksson Ek had a pretty solid showing.
Yeah,
too.
he was
Oh,
really
yeah.
And I
good.
think
Eriksson Ek was really good. I
Jonas
thought
Brodin had a goal, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, he did.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a tough one to
Yeah.
like think about.
Wild were there at 5.
Yeah.
Well, they were when we did the top. They were one of the top 5 teams with
Right.
the most
Most
players
guys.
here too. And then the last team that slipped in there. I don't know if you guys would have ever gotten to this one. Detroit.
Oh yeah, Larkin,
Larkin.
Attorney,
Larkin.
Lucas Raymond.
Larkin
Those
was
two
an animal
guys,
out
yeah.
there.
No,
Did
fair
some
enough.
heavy lifting, but fun little trivia there. Aidan's on a roll, I'll say.
I'm on a
He's
heater.
taking advantage of the 1v1s
Keeping
and
my chain
he's
for a
putting
little
up
bit
the
here.
numbers here.
It's that
so-
international play you've got locked
Yeah,
on.
Yeah,
it's good
apparently.
to see.
We got to get back to 1980s captains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get
Kyle,
that.
Kyle Cushman just can't come back to the show.
Yeah, that's the
Otherwise-
problem. No, real
when I
problem
lose
with
my
him.
streak. That guy's got a bank of knowledge. But well, I think that caps up a very good, just sort of stretch of Four Nation content, man. It
Big
was
time.
just so fun to talk about. Makes me so excited for Milan next year. Are you kidding?
But let's hope. I mean, I guess we got the trade deadline coming up. But like, what's it going to be like going from this to like a random regular season game? It's
Yeah.
going to be a tough.
Tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Saturday is the regular season. Is just jumps right back into it.
Afternoon games and all.
Yeah, right into it. And I think, you know what? I think some players will come back and you'll see the pace difference between the guys who are coming out of a gold medal game and the guys that are in Cancun. But there's a lot of sickness going around at this tournament too. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple guys who were playing games last night sitting out on Saturday
Yeah.
too. But we also are just like a couple weeks here away from the trade deadline. This is kind of like really important time. I think a really important stretch for a lot of these bubble playoff teams to see what their kind of plan going into the deadline is going to be. And whatever it is, we'll be here to recap it all and to talk about it all and speculate on all that kind of stuff. It'll be a lot of fun.
It'll be fun.
So make sure you subscribe to this channel and you don't miss another show. But that's all the time we do have today. For all of us at Top Shelf, Levi Smith, John Matisz, myself, Aidan Thakkar, and our friends over at Skyscanner, we will see you next time.